Welcome back to Waters Ironworks. We are out here at Pioneer Farms today. It has been a while since we've done a video, but I'm starting to walk a group of folks through the level 2 Abana curriculum, and that has gotten me inspired to do a few more videos for everyone. So I thought today we would start out with the basics of drop tong welding. One of the first projects in the level 2 Abana curriculum is a fire poker. This one's a little bit of extra length on it, but we've got a drop tong weld here. We've got a drop tong weld down here. So it's important to know how to do this. Rather than focusing on the project though, we're gonna take a look at sort of an easy way to go into drop tong welding. To do that, we're gonna start with 2 1/2-inch bars. We will make these initially long enough that we don't actually need to hold them with tongs, so drop tong weld without a drop tong in it. But our first weld is just going to be trying to stick these two together on top of each other like this. We're not going to worry about scarfs. We're not going to worry about a lot of the things that make the welding more complex. Just 2 easy, simple bars. We'll try and get them stuck together. Once we've built up a little bit of confidence with that, then we'll actually do an appropriate scarf. We'll talk about what that looks like, and we'll weld these together end to end. So let's get these hot and we'll take our first welding pass. So we're gonna take our 2 bars and we're gonna put them into the fire. Our goal is to have them next to each other, but not quite touching. We wanna make sure that we're heating up the same part of both bars so that we get them up to welding temperature together. We don't want one too cool, one too hot. We don't want them actually touching. If they get up to welding temperature and they are touching, they tend to stick. You can actually use that to tell if your pieces are at welding temperature. Tap them lightly together in the fire and they will feel sticky on each other. But we've got these in there. We've got a nice clean fire just starting the day. Let's get these up to welding temperature, and then we're gonna bring them out to the anvil and hammer them together and get them to stick. We are right up at forge welding temperature here. I'm gonna pull these out, put them on top of each other, and give it a light hammer blow. So, out we go. And there we go. We've got them to stick. This is a pretty weak weld still. If I tug on that, it's gonna come apart. But for our first welding pass, and what you wanna practice as you're working with these longer bars, kind of building up your confidence, is just, can you get them to stick that much? If you can get them to stick that much, they can go back in the fire, you can get them hot, and you can work to refine that weld. So don't go crazy with these, or you are likely to damage the weld. Rather than setting it, you're just gonna kind of blow it away. So, couple light hits, set that weld. They should feel like they're sticking together, and then it's gonna be into the fire to set the second weld. What we're gonna do though is I'm gonna cut these ends off where it's a little bit chewed up there from the forge welding, and then we're gonna talk about what the drop tong scarf looks like, and we'll do an actual drop tong weld with it. Get this right though before you move on to the next step. So the first thing that we need to do for our drop tong weld is come in and set up our scarves. What we want is kind of this shape right here. We're gonna do a little bit of an upset to get some extra mass in there. This could even have a little bit more. And then short, sharp taper, and do a set down on the near side of the anvil. And what we wind up with is, I think of it kind of like 2 hands interlinking with each other, and that will be our weld joint. So we've got this 1/2-inch material here. Let's go in and put these scarves on it. And I would recommend the first time you're doing this, start with something bigger. Some 1/2-inch material is great. It holds that welding heat a little bit longer, makes everything a little bit easier to do. But let me get this hot and I'll show you that first scarf. So the first thing we're gonna do is come in and put in a generous upset here. Keep in mind, we get a lot of bending once we get more than about 1.5 times the thinnest dimension hot. So we are fighting a little bit of that. I'm hammering this at a little bit of an angle. I'm gonna want that scarf to be angled when we go in to do the scarf. So if this winds up with a little bit of an angle there on the end, I'm not gonna be unhappy about that. Let's take one more pass, just put a little bit more upset into that. There we go. That is more than enough of an upset here. So now what we want to do is we'll take another heat on this. We're going to come in and put in a steep taper on it, right? So we're going to come in very aggressively with the hammer right there at the edge of the anvil, knock that taper in. Couple blows on the side because I know that's going to swell out. And then we're going to come in and taper this. Clean those sides up a little bit. So we've got our taper going there. It's reasonably steep. We're then going to come here, bring this to the near side of the anvil, and just give it a couple blows here to establish that shape that we're looking for. The reason I keep emphasizing a nice sharp taper, if you'll zoom in here on the anvil, right, if I've got a long taper like this and I'm going to weld this to something else that it's got a long taper on it, my section that I've got to weld is really long. That's more work to do. It's more opportunities for things to go wrong. However, if I've got a nice short taper, I've got less area to weld. These areas also are going to stay hot longer than if they were coming out way out there like that. Right, the more mass there is, the longer it holds on to that welding heat. So this short weld like this is a much easier weld to do than if you really let these things extend out. So try and keep those tapers nice and steep. So we've got scarves on both of these. We can take a look at them. This one I wound up just doing that set down a little longer than it needed to be. I think the shorter one actually looks a little bit better. But this is the basic idea of what we're going for, is we're going to bring these in, we're going to put them like that, and we're going to hammer those together and weld them. When we're doing this, keep focused on the anvil, right? I'm going to pull these out. I'm going to put this one down. I'm going to set this one on top of it. That's going to support it. These tongs are going to go onto the ground. My hammer is going to be ready, and I'm going to give it a couple taps. What I would highly recommend that you do, especially if this is your first time or your first time joining these kind of two pieces together for a different project, is spend a couple minutes putting them in the fire like you've got them heating up, pull them out, know what orientation they're going to be at in the fire. So I've got this one up so that it's the right way. I've got this one down. I'm going to pull these out. I'm going to take a half turn toward my anvil here, set that down, that drops. My hammer should be right here. I grab my hammer and I go. I want to do that 3 or 4 or 5 times to make sure that I really have all those motions down. You need to be calm and cool about this when you do it and when you're working with the hot steel. It's easy to get kind of ramped up. You're going to hit things too hard. You're going to fumble around with stuff. So practice that more than you think you need to in order to get it done. I'll give you one final little pro tip. Becomes more important as you work with smaller pieces. But as we pull these out and I come here and I set this down, if I set this flat against the anvil is actually sucking heat out of my joint right here. So I can angle this up if I want to get fancy, holding that up off the anvil face and not actually putting it down on the anvil face until I'm ready to drop the tongs and release them. That can make things, save you just a little bit of heat, make things a little bit easier. But let's get these hot and we'll do the weld. I'm not gonna bother with flux on these. I'm in a coal fire. It's a pretty simple weld. I don't see a whole lot of need for it, but you certainly could use flux if you'd like to. Few light taps, as you saw. You can see how bubbly it is there. Enough to stick it together. A little off on my placement, but that's okay. What I'm gonna do now is I'm carefully gonna go back into the fire. We're gonna heat that joint up. And the second pass, we're really gonna try and weld stuff together a little bit more solidly. Just going to take our time with this, starting to refine the shaping a little bit. We'll give it some hammer blows. Once we drop below welding heat, because we're still trying to weld this, we're going to stop and we're not going to continue hammering. The steel is very hot. The more hammer blows you put in there, the more it's going to thin that steel out, and we don't want to over thin it. So hit it while you're welding it. Once it drops below welding heat, stop, back into the fire. Starting to look pretty good here. Everything's heating up and cooling down together. That's a good sign. If you've got a weld that isn't solid, what you can see sometimes is one side of the weld heats up or cools down faster than the other side. A little bit of a line right there. That side's blended in. We're going to take a heat, put it in there first, and then come up and clean that weld on this next pass. So my welding is pretty well done here. Happy with how stuff is looking. Just clean this bar up a little bit. Take everything down close to the original thickness. Yeah. It's not looking bad. The more sort of mass you have in there where that joint's going to be, the more work that you do where those lines are, the better you're going to be able to blend them. That's why getting that upset in there to start with is so critical, so that we don't thin anything out too much. Let me cool this down. I'm going to hit it on the wire wheel. We'll take a real critical look at this weld and see what it looks like. So let's take a look at this weld. It looks pretty good. As I go around this, I can see a little bit of a weld line right there. Carrying in just a little bit to the side. A little bit of a line right there. But overall, that weld is looking nice. It's looking pretty secure. I do think when you're starting welding especially, I'm a big fan of destructive testing on your welds, right? You want to be confident in these things. You want to know they're going to stick. So let's take this and drop it into the vise here. Let's bend it over. Yeah, that's pretty solid. I am not getting a lot of bend at the weld. Let's move that just a little bit. But right there at the ends, make sure we're not cheating. That's solid, right? You can see the chalk marks. Our weld is right here. That section's a little bit thicker. It's not quite the original dimension, so it doesn't surprise me that it's bending on the opposite sides of that. But that is a good, solid weld. Hopefully, this inspires you to go out, if you haven't done a drop tong weld, try them out, see how they work. I'll keep an eye on the comments for a couple weeks after this video comes out, and I'll try and shoot a follow-up video. So if you have questions, drop the questions into the comments, and we'll do a follow-up video, try and troubleshoot anything people are running into. Thanks so much, and we'll see you later.